be honest with us because people think they're infected out for a goof. All of a sudden, the Federal Bureau of Investigation because they handed my producer a knife, an ice pick, and they were going to get a sawed-off shotgun from their trunk for a Ben Shapiro live show. This stumbles in our lap because of our audience. I would love to do nothing but the entertain jokes that make people find tasteless, but I'm okay with it. No, I don't expect everyone to like it.
But not just taste, it's meaning. Mr. Lispy. It just feels nasty.
Yeah, well, first off, you're not quoting jokes.
What am I quoting?
You're quoting me referencing his own self-description. Those aren't the jokes in that video. It's a 20-minute video. There are jokes, and then they're missing the Lispy Griffin box because he says the Lispy Griffin box, right? So there are different things you can't take. In other words, David Letterman interviewing Donald Trump, where he attacks him, and then take some jokes and misapply them to an interview where he's being serious. No, those weren't the jokes. People need to watch the 20-minute video. People need to watch the over 20 or 30 Vox rebuttals, many of which never involved this person. They are brutal. They are rough. I am unapologetic, especially in the face of the biggest corporations in the world who are trying to ensure that independent voices, yourself included, John, yourself included, once the channel gets big enough, that you are not able to have that voice. When my wars and legal battles go with NBC Universal, ABC Disney, Viacom, Turner CNN, and now they say to YouTube, well, we don't want them on the platform. Listen, don't have to like what I say, but I think at the end of the day, you'll be glad that there's someone there doing it.
And the algorithm they changed to nail you for doing things like that now also deplatform channels that simply covered sensitive issues, like a history teacher's channel that showed Nazi footage to teach about World War II.
Right.
And I've had stuff. Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I just say I don't understand what's your point there. Yeah, I think it's horrible.
I'm taking your side on this, in that I've done videos with Camille Foster and Larry Elder.
Racism has never been more insignificant a factor in one's success.
And YouTube said the content might offend marginalized individuals or groups. My video on politicians who send kids to private schools but
what up?
are against school choice. Topics may be
I'm actually having dinner for breakfast.
Right.
So I didn't feel like cooking this morning. So I just heat up some leftovers from last night. It's almost gone now.
It seemed needlessly nasty.
Had some
Do you think anything is as needlessly nasty as referring to Donald Trump as Putin's cup?
I had some broccoli and cauliflower. I ate all my broccoli. And some salmon and some asparagus. Asparagus. Got some salmon. Yo, that salmon was banging, yo. Up. Where that? There you go. Yo, that salmon was good, yo. The cauliflower, potatoes. I made some baked potatoes. Just eat like the king last night and this morning. People talking about, oh, let's have breakfast for dinner. I'm like, fuck that. Let's have dinner for breakfast. Damn. Well, y'all can taste this salmon right now. That shit good.
Holster is not his cock holster. Melania Trump is a feckless cunt. That's the standard by which you judge me. Ours is a PG-13.
But there's a difference between mocking the president, the overclass, and mocking minorities.
Well, no, I wasn't mocking minorities. I was mocking NBC Universal, who, by the way, co-produced the show with YouTube and Fox. Incestuous relationship. YouTube financially co-produces a program which is a subsidiary of NBC Universal. I bankrolled this entire thing from $40,000 of my savings. So yeah, there's a bit of a David and Goliath story, and sometimes, you know what, you got to use a sling as opposed to a polished sword. But no, I think that you're buying something just from watching it out of context. The context would require you watching every rebuttal that we've done to Vox, and I guarantee you that would include thousands, just our rebuttals to Vox, thousands of references, most of which come from PubMed, most of which come from peer-reviewed scientific journals, certainly in COVID, coming from the CDC and World Health Organization. And today, we just forced one of my producers to eat a mushroom because he had a lifelong fear that because someone lost their faith due to a fungi similar to a mushroom. It's silly, and we do it, and we're the only ones doing it on the right. And you know what? The one thing is, I grew up wishing there was at least one alternative to far-left entertainment. And I think when you look at what's permissible with Trevor Noah, what's permissible with everyone on these giant corporate networks at this point, and what we do, it really is pretty tame. Humor is, I think it was Phyllis Diller said this, it's a Robert Tipp's sword. It's a way to make this point without the wrong play. And you know what really bothered me with comedians, to kind of drop parallel, Sarah Silverman, and Amy Schumer, they were shocked.
De las piezas de siempre y refresca tus espacios con piezas hechas por tus propias manos.
En este curso de doméstica aprenderás a usar concreto, para...
I don't know if you ever followed Sarah Silverman, but her whole act was a bait and switch. Her would be racist, her would be anti-Semitic. Like, for example, one of her famous jokes was where she said, I realized that a lot of, you have these redneck Christians who blame the Jews for killing Jesus, and I think that's ridiculous. I'm still one of the few people who blame blacks. That was her joke.
I don't think she could tell that joke today.
No, and she certainly couldn't tell the joke about how she watches starving children in Africa and wonders why are all these 8-year-olds pregnant. That was her joke. We're the only ones doing it on the right. And you know what?
All right.
The one thing
that was delicious.
There was at least one alternative to far-left entertainment. And I think when you look at what's permissible with Trevor Noah, what's permissible with everyone on these giant corporate networks at this point, and what we do, it really is pretty tame. Humor is, I think it was Phyllis Diller, it's a Robert Tipp's sword. It's a way to make a point without the wrong blow. And you know what really bothered me with comedians, to kind of drop parallel, Sarah Silverman, and Amy Schumer, they were shot comics. If you ever followed Sarah Silverman, but her whole act was the bait and switch, where it would be racist, it would be anti-Semitic. Like, for example, one of her famous jokes was where she said, I realized that a lot of, these redneck Christians who blame the Jews for killing Jesus, and I think that's ridiculous. I'm still one of the few people who blames blacks. That was her joke.
I don't think she could tell that joke today.
No, and she certainly couldn't tell the joke about how she watches starving children in Africa and wonders why are all these 8-year-olds pregnant. That was her joke. Rough. I think it's abhorrent. I think she has the right to do it. Now, I personally think that she was funny doing that, but now she's said you can't describe something as gay. And so what Sarah Silverman has done is made her many, many, many millions once she's had her DreamWorks deals and her show at Comedy Central, and then she's pulled the ladder up and closed the door behind her. I don't want to do that. I could do that. I want to see other people on these platforms coming up. I don't want to be the last one. And I remember being really excited coming up and thinking, well, you know what? If I work really hard here online, it doesn't matter what some executive says. It doesn't matter what some producer says. If people want to watch this, we can create it and we'll find our people. Now that's gone. Now there's more control than ever before. I mean, even at this point, too, think about it. When we have to deal with the FCC, at least you knew what you were dealing with. You couldn't say anything scatological, certain bad words, right? But now you say something that isn't even offensive, and then someone with some small blog and a few people on Twitter amplify it, and the person loses their job because people deem it offensive enough that day. I mean, dealing with the FCC was a cakewalk when I was on radio compared to this. Now it's not about the FCC canceling you based on guidelines and rules that you actually know. It's people trying to remove your ability to make a living forever based on rules that no one exists. And hopefully that goes away. But it starts with some lawsuits and some states taking action. Florida's done well. Texas looks like it's going to be next. And we need a few more. That could really change the momentum.
And you've succeeded with it. You're getting election time 7 million views. That's just about equal to Fox. It is equal to CNN on YouTube.
It was 16 million, actually.
Oh, I read 7.
Yeah, no, that's because our stream broke, and then we had to restart it. But cumulatively, it was, 16 million. And listen, I think that's silly. But I think that shows what a failure. What a failure CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox News have done in serving their viewers. We covered it in real time. We were the first ones covering, these ballots coming in on, what are those, red flyer wagons in Detroit. While that was happening, you're saying, that's weird. And then there were reports coming in at 4:30 in the morning saying, well, in those coolers are camera equipment. I've traveled with a crew of 15 for years in my life. Never once have we put cameras in Coleman coolers. Are you in that habit, John? I know you're familiar with camera equipment. You put them in Coleman coolers to take them to election precincts? No. So that's the only reason on election night we didn't get dinged for conspiracies, because it was happening in real time and no one else had their answers at that point. I don't think that we should be getting those kinds of numbers on an even playing field. I think that Fox News, with their billions of dollars in profits, should probably be able to put out a better product. But I think they called Arizona with a fraction of the voting, and we waited.
One more criticism of stuff I've watched from you.
Keep them coming. I deserve all of them.
Okay. Cultural Appropriation Month.
Love it.
You're dressed like, I don't know what, you're drowning a blonde doll in a glass of water. I don't even understand the joke.
Yeah, that was an episode where we talked about, so keep in mind too, I was in, as a matter of fact, what's funny, this is a video that you reviewed for me when I was at Fox News when I went to the Cancun Climate Summit. And you gave me really good feedback. You said, you know what, it's good, surprisingly good information, talk less, show more. And I said, okay. And I followed that. I went down to the Cancun Climate Summit where I watched Ted Turner advocate China's one-child policy to improve climate change. Cultural Appropriation Month is in any given week. We appropriate a new culture, because to appropriate is to appreciate. Now this comes from on the heels with Taco Tuesday being banned at schools, for example, or sombrero-themed parties. And then it grew from there. That episode was several where we've been talking about how the Green New Deal, and specifically at the Cancun Climate Summits, the advocacy of China's one-child policy, which, by the way, has resulted in countless girls being drowned in a bathtub. And so we portray that in a way that is shocking, offensive, so people know that our elected officials are actually proposing legislation. And if people are more offended by me pantomiming what happens in China every single day than politicians who actually would, if they had their way, limit families to one child per household in order to appease Gaia, the green earth god, then that's just someone I disagree with. I don't think the joke is more offensive than the comments.
Other people who've been demonetized include Israel Levant's network,
Yeah.
the Epic Times, Carl Benjamin, Tommy Robinson, Paul Joseph Watson. Any comments?
I think it's terrible. This has been going on for a long time. I can say I don't know all of the content on all of those channels. But what I can know is rules are applied equally. I'm willing to bet the people you just mentioned, Ezra Levant and the Epic Times, and I know Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, I know he gets into edge territory, but I can guarantee you that Ezra Levant and Epic Times, unless I'm wrong, probably haven't had someone blowing Satan and selling sneakers with clouds of blood. That one's child-friendly and still monetized. Oh, if they're going to claim to be a neutral platform, I don't know how you monetize one, make it kid-friendly, and put the other behind an age restriction. I don't need to know all the details. I just need to know the main ones. Is Dick or Dildo monetized and child-friendly? Yes. Has Ezra Levant ever used a cuss word? No, he bleeps it. Okay, don't really care about the opinion. No. It's just not a rule that's applicable. And right now, and this is something too, all information right now, I think we both know this, all information is controlled by about 5 companies. 5 companies. Apple, Amazon, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. It used to be, remember, you get 3 networks, and people would say, well, we'll never get the numbers of Johnny Carson again. right? Because he would average, like, he gets like 50 million a night. And then you had this sort of, there was fracturing in media, where you then had thousands of channels.
We had 2020, which you watched as a kid, and we would get 15, 20 million people.
Yes, because there were only 3 networks, and there was a fracturing, and they had all these other networks, like thousands, right, of channels. And people said, well, you never get those numbers again. And now we've gone back to that in a way, where it's really 5 companies, and when you're talking about consuming media with people under the age of 35, Netflix, Amazon, YouTube. And then there's some peripheral players like HBO Max or maybe Hulu, but certainly fewer than hundreds. You'd be able to count them on one hand, maybe 2 if you're, you know, like a royal, one of the royal children, depending how far down the lineage you go.
But more than we used to have. People do have more choice.
No, but people aren't subscribed when you look at the unpluggers. So what I'm saying is the numbers went from 50 million with Johnny Carson to the point where, you know, let's use Fox News as an example. Fox News was the #1 leader in all of cable, right? It's not just cable news, all of cable many nights. And that was getting 3 million views in prime time, right? That pales in comparison, like Cobra Kai just averaged 36 million viewers. So Breaking Bad, their season finale was, I believe, 12 to 13 million. And that was considered the last big hurrah. And my point is now it's more concentrated again. And then specifically as it relates not just to media consumption, but human interactions.
Google Fi, a phone plan by Google. Meet Simply Unlimited, our most affordable plan for unlimited data, calls, and texts. With
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the study of antiquity and the Middle Ages. As always, I'm your host, Nick Barksdale, and today we are joined by a very special guest, Dr. Miano. Dr. Miano, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
And so now we come to a popular and widespread topic, and that is the subject of ancient handbags. You've probably read about them. I know they've been in Ancient Aliens. And so, Dr. Miano, would you talk to us about ancient handbags? Why were they used? Why were they depicted? But more importantly, why have they produced so many conspiracy theories?
I guess, well, in answer to the last question first, I think when you're holding a container of any kind, everyone's automatically going to think, like, what's in there, you know? But as far as what they are, it depends on what culture we're talking about. This is something that the lost ancient technology folks do all the time. And that is, they will look at similarities of some kind of object between cultures, and they'll assimilate, right? Oh, look at over here. You know, they have this, and they also have it over here. They do pyramids too, right? They must be connected, right? You have to see the links. As far as archaeology goes, though, in order to assume that something is connected, right? Like we call it a culture, or an assemblage, where you have a bunch of artifacts from, like, say, 2 neighboring communities that look very similar. You know, when you have a lot of links like that, like look at this and look at that, they both look the same, not only in one area, but in a bunch of different areas, you assume that there was influence between them, right? But the further apart in time they get, and the further away in space they get, you know, the less likely it is. And a lot of the lost ancient high technology folks just look at any one similarity and they assimilate. And that's what they do with the handbags, right? Now, just in general, do you think that a handbag is something that there's no chance that 2 independent cultures could come up with on their own, right? It's a very simple device, right? Anyone could come up with that. Doesn't matter what culture you're from. You don't need to learn it from another culture, right? You can invent it yourself on your own, thinking of it, devising it all by yourself. You need something more than that to connect them. So like in my handbags video that I have one on handbags. I go through different cultures. Now the one that gets all the attention, most of the attention, is the Assyrian one. So you see like these figures on the Assyrian palaces, and they often have human bodies and animal heads, like this is the head of a bird or something like that. And they're called the Apkallu in Syrian, and they are minor deities, right? They're protector spirits. And we know this from their actual writings. That's another thing people don't often do. They just look at the art, and they don't look at the writings. You just do both to figure out what things are. But that's what they're called in the writings, the Apkallu, and they're protector spirits. And that's why they're in the palace, because they're protecting people who walk through the corridors and through the gates and so forth. And they're carrying these things that people call handbags, but in reality, they're not handbags in this instance. They're buckets. Buckets to carry water. And what they're doing in a lot of the imagery is carrying these buckets of water to the sacred date palms to water them, along with basically what looks like a pine cone, but this is and a piece of date palms to pollinize the date palms. And we know that they're buckets because we have other Assyrian art which shows actual people, not gods in this case, but actual people carrying the buckets full of stuff, of other things. They're called dalu, that's the Assyrian name for them. And we've actually found in archaeology the buckets that look just like them, so we know that they're buckets. But as far as other cultures are concerned, there are some that are handbags. So for example, if you look at the Native American imagery, there's one on Olmec art, for example, a famous one, where he's holding what looks like a purse. And there's some Native American art. Those probably are incense bags, actual bags, yeah. But there's no indication in any of them that they're connected with each other, or that they are some kind of high-tech object, right? They're buckets, they're bags. These are just basic human instruments. Nothing to write home about.
So in short, I'm really sorry to disappoint some of you, but the chances of them containing a nuclear launch code probably isn't real.
Yeah. I actually had someone argue with me on my YouTube channel that the Apkallu, that shows them with their animal heads and the human bodies, were real. This person actually believed that they were real. Like, this is not a mythological creature. This is a real-life creature. I guess that was somehow created through genetic engineering or something like that.
And to our subscribers, also remember, check out the links in the video description below. And I'm actually going to include his video on handbags. I think many of you are really going to love that. It's very interesting, and I can't recommend it enough. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here today.
Alright. So, Pillow Cube just sent me this cube-shaped pillow, and I'm totally excited. Let's see what's inside. First off, I really like the construction. It's got a quilted shell built right in, and it's made with high-grade viscoelastic memory foam. The foam itself is
Egypt has always traditionally been given prominence as the height of ancient culture. Nubia is now coming into its own and is being understood to be of equal importance. It is different from ancient Egypt, but it is equally important and not just an adjunct to this Egyptian culture. What archaeologists do when they pull material from the ground or when they translate texts, they bring their own cultural baggage to that interpretation and the baggage of the times that they live in. And so it's imperative that we go back and continually reassess the things that we take as facts Many of the early archaeologists came to the study of ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia from the perspective of Semitic languages or the study of the Hebrew Bible, and it was very important to them to bring Egypt specifically into the sphere of biblical studies. And so they had to carve Egypt away from Africa to bring it into that sphere. And the way that they did that was they used race. So these early archaeologists effectively made ancient Egypt white in the sense that they made it part of a dominant Western culture, and ancient Nubia was separated from that. It was black. And this was how they took Egypt out of Africa and put it into this Semitic sphere, this biblical sphere. And it's only in recent decades, the last 3-4 decades, that Egyptology has really moved away from that. And scholars who are studying Nubia are really given the chance to give a voice to this Nubian material that it wasn't given much of a chance to have in the past. Someone asks me, what was the ancient Egyptians' view of X? I immediately think of a two-pronged view, because the ancient Egyptians had an official view of many things, and this is the view that would be put up on the walls of temples and on the walls of the tombs of the elites. That was an official, let's say, state-sanctioned view. That bore little to no resemblance to what people actually may have thought. It was the official view. So when you look at Nubia, as depicted on the walls of temples in Egypt, you will see Nubians being crushed under the chariot wheels of the king. You will see Nubians being dragged back to Egypt enslaved. What we see on the ground in terms of archaeological evidence is quite different. We see people who had Nubian names, people who were using Nubian material culture, living within Egypt, working in Egypt, marrying people with Egyptian names. So something quite different from the very intense militaristic scenes that you see in temples. When George Reisner excavated Kerma, he found the statue, a large, beautiful statue of Senui, and also a statue partially destroyed of Jaffa Hapi, her husband. It was a very large tomb, and with size in Egypt and in Nubia, we tend to assume ruler, or someone very important, which usually translates to ruler. We now understand, yes, this was a ruler's tomb. It is a completely different time period than Jaffa Hapi and Senui lived in, much later. We understand it to be a local ruler, so it was a Kerman official, who, for reasons we can guess at, brought or had these two statues brought to Kerma and put in this place. It could have been an appropriation of Egyptian culture in general, just to show that, yes, I can own these things that are Egyptian wonderful works of art. Because what we're saying, if you read between the lines, is whoever owns these statues is a powerful person. And that means this art has power.
I like the way I teach, but I know it's not the only way to teach.
This video is part of Project Africa, a collaboration of over 25 history YouTubers. More info on that at the end of the program. If you go to the British Museum on any given day, you might run into Augustus. Well, not him, but a sculpture of his head. Though technically he never claimed the title, Augustus is considered to be the first emperor of the Roman Empire. This particular head is one of many thousands of artifacts that make up the museum's extensive collection. However,
so I have a few commissions I'll be working on for the next couple weeks. Where's the last picture? Jesus Christ. What did I do? I saw it out. Is it in here? No, it's not in here. No. Is it in here? Nope, it's not in there. Is it in this one? Oh, there it goes. So, I'll be working on this photo, and this photo.
This particular artifact has a really interesting story, for it wasn't found in the city of Rome, the Italian peninsula, Europe, or even within the confines of what was once the Roman Empire. It was found amongst the ruins of the ancient city of Meroe, located today in what is modern Sudan. That's right, in Sudan, in the middle of what today is a sparsely populated desert. Of course, Meroe wasn't always like this. It was once the capital of one of the most incredible empires of the ancient world, one that is often skipped in many world history books, or at best, overshadowed by its ancient neighbor to the north, Egypt. It's kind of a shame, because the great civilization and empire that Meroe was once the center of had a tremendous impact on our world today. The civilization I'm referring to is that of ancient Nubia and the Kingdom of Kush. So without further ado, let's begin. Let's take a look at this place we call Nubia. First, let's clarify the term. Nubia defines a geographic region that's located in the northeast corner of Africa. Today, this region would encompass the southern end of Egypt and the northern half of modern Sudan. Running through the center of it is the Great Nile River. Nubia is generally broken up into two parts according to the direction that the Nile flows. Lower Nubia is in the north, while Upper Nubia is in the south. This at first is a bit confusing, but keep in mind, for the Nubians as well as the Egyptians, their north was the direction from where the source of the Nile was, not the Mediterranean Sea where it emptied out. Upper Nubia was also the heartland of the Kingdom of Kush. The Nile itself is divided by a series of rapids called cataracts, which have throughout time served as natural boundaries for different regions within Nubia. These cataracts formed when the river ran into outcrops of hard rock, forming a system of unnavigable rapids. The first cataract, at Aswan, is where Nubia begins. The last one, the sixth cataract, is just north of the modern Sudanese capital of Khartoum. So where does the name Nubia come from? Many believe that it's derived from the word Nub, which means gold in the ancient Egyptian language. Others believe that the name comes from tribes that settled there called the Nuba or Noba. However, perhaps a more common name for this region was Taseti, meaning land of the bow, due to the region's highly skilled archers. Nubian can also be an ambiguous term. As a people, the ancient Nubians weren't made up of a single group. In fact, they were extremely diverse, with different ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, languages, and even religious beliefs. Since the earliest historical records that mention it, Nubia and Kush have been tied.
Yo, let me see something. Yo. So they're talking about. See, this is why you should read, yo. The dude showed he talked about the different cataracts. And if you look right here, it says second cataract, third cataract, fourth cataract, fifth cataract, about Nubia and how it's upper and lower because of the flow of the river, and that map is actually flipped around. I think this motherfucker was reading from this book just now, yo. That's why I'm trying to find exactly the paragraph, yo. I swear to God, yo, the information he was spitting, yo, I'm like, yo, this motherfucker is reading from this book. That's why it'd be hard for me to find, like, information, yo, because I don't know. I done read so much shit, yo. It's like, you're not telling me nothing new, nigga. And this is early. You can see how early that is. This is like within the first 100 pages of this book, you're already learning about the geographical areas of Kim and Nubia. And so he's like, oh, it's a forgotten place and nobody don't really remember the Nubians. The fuck if we don't? The fuck if we don't? Bro, you learn about this shit in the first 100 pages, bro. You sound like you was reading from this book just now. The two lands. Yeah, I swear, y'all. I don't know, I can't find that paragraph. Now, I don't know. Man, but if y'all want to know all about fucking, like, the real African shit, yo, just grab this book, yo.
For better or worse, to the land of Egypt. In fact, most of our information about ancient Nubia and Kush come from Egyptian sources. This can be a bit problematic, not because Egyptians weren't good at recording history, but because Egypt and the peoples of Nubia were great rivals. Due to this, there may be, and often are, biases in Egyptian accounts for their inner...
No, he's telling the story wrong, yo. Nubia and Ethiopia are the parents of Egypt, you know what I'm saying? And the only thing that fucking fucked that shit up was when the Northerners started coming down trying to take over Egypt. And it happened really early because motherfuckers back then weren't really like warring like that until the fucking outsiders came back, you know? The fucking the Hittites. And there was another group of motherfuckers that came down, and then the motherfucking Arabs came in, yo. When them Arab Berbers came in, it was over from then, yo. And they came in, and then they started mixing, and then they think like they Egyptian now. When the first Egyptians were black Nubians and Ethiopians who really like thousands of years before Egypt even started, they were already like great scholars and shit. Like Egypt is not the predecessor for everything, yo. Nubia is, and that's why there's this one documentary called the Black Mummy of the Green Nile, and they found this mummy of a child in Lower Sudan that's older than any other mummies. Like, yo, like these motherfuckers already had the mummification process down packed to a science, like 1,000 years before fucking Egypt was ever thought of, before they even moved in there. And that's something else too. Like the who we think of the dynastic Egyptians, they're not the actual builders of the Giza plateau with the pyramids and the Sphinx and the underground catacombs and that the dynastic Egyptians that lived there 5,000 years ago, they didn't build that. They didn't build that. They found that shit because it was the black motherfuckers from Nubia who actually constructed that shit, yo. And that's where some of the oldest pyramids are at, yo, in fucking Sudan and shit. But I don't know. That's why the Egyptian culture is fucking fascinating, but they didn't come up with a lot of that shit, yo. They didn't. That shit was already old fucking knowledge to them. And that's why it seems like, oh, they just sprang up out of nowhere as this magnificent civilization and this grand culture. Like, nobody can do that. Like, great cultures just don't, like, pop up out of nowhere like that. They got their most of their knowledge from older civilizations that already knew how to fucking construct the pyramids and goddamn use the mummification techniques to preserve bodies and shit. Like, that wasn't their fucking thing, yeah. And that's why they don't remember how to do it. Like, you don't have any hieroglyphs or anything that tells of the construction of any of that shit. They don't know how that shit was built. They would have kept meticulous records of they keep meticulous records of everything else except their building endeavors. Like, come on, there would be hella fucking hieroglyphs of the grand workings and mechanisms of construction, but it's not. They don't even talk about it in the Bible. But the Bible don't even mention the fucking pyramids. But you got motherfucking slaves fleeing Pharaoh and Egypt and all this shit, and let my people go and play. Come on, man. But y'all don't mention the pyramids. Oh man, y'all gotta think about it now. Think about it. Why they don't mention that shit, man? 'Cause that shit's so fucking old. Even in Bible times, that shit was ancient. Like, the motherfuckers don't know how to. Like, man, look, that shit's so fucking old. The only conclusion that you can come to is that black people built that shit, yo. 'Cause we all know the first modern human was the black African. And for a long time, there was nobody else around except black Africans. And these construction sites go back so far in time, it's to a period, it dates back to a period where there wasn't that much diversity in the human race. There wasn't that much diversity. That's what killed me sometimes. People like, oh man, Hotep this and Ma'at that and all this shit. And it's like, that's cool, but do you think that culture was really the culture and civilization that started that? I think there's still a progenitor civilization that we just do not remember. And a lot of people have done a lot of research on it. And there's a lot of evidence that says that, hey, there is something, there was something going on this planet way further back in time than we really think, yo. And it took place so long ago that there is barely, hardly any fucking evidence of this shit left. But we find these weird ass little anomalies, and then when you look at the global system of pyramids and megalithic structures, it's like, man, this shit can't, it couldn't have been just like happenstance that these things are all over the world. That shit just don't happen like that. I'm telling you, man, there was definitely something. But even for this simple history, like what this guy is trying to spit, like, this is the shit he says, oh, most people don't know about it, and blah, 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 blah. And why is that, though? Why don't more people know about ancient Nubia and Kush and Ethiopia and how much they really contributed towards understandings of reality that we have right now, you know, towards all the sciences. And once again, we try to give the dynastic Egyptians so much credit for, you know, mathematics and governance and spirituality and all this other stuff that we give them credit for. But at the same time, it's like, where did they get the basis of their knowledge? I'm telling you, man, Dr. Robert Schoch already told y'all, yo. Dr. Robert Schoch, he said, look, man, look. He said the damn Sphinx is 12,000 years old, not 5,000 years old. And everybody like, 12,000 years old? Ain't nobody was building no shit like that 12,000 years ago. And he's like, well, hey, that's what the evidence say. You know, I'm just going off the evidence, and it says 12,000 years. So 12,000 years ago, who the fuck was out there building some shit like that? It wasn't no Arab Berber looking motherfuckers, I'll tell you that right now. It wasn't no goddamn Islamic Hittites and all these motherfuckers. And it definitely wasn't no Canaanite, Phoenicians, no kind of Roman looking motherfuckers either, man. They've been some Africans out that shit, yo. 12,000 years ago. That's a while back. And then they say, well, ain't nobody was doing nothing like that. Nobody was putting forth major construction endeavors 12,000 years ago. Man, that was the Stone Age. Man, in the Stone Age, ain't nobody was doing that, man. These Neolithic motherfuckers, man, people still hunter-gatherers. How you go from hunter-gatherers to motherfucking civilization? That they can't do it. And then they found Göbekli Tepe all the way up in fucking Turkey somewhere. And they say, well, how old is that? They say about 12,000 years. They say another one is 12,000 years. Oh hell! Now y'all can't explain away two different sources. It don't make no sense no more to keep up with the lies. I try to keep up with the lies. I'm really not even lies. It's just new information, man. That's just how science and knowledge and understanding works, man. We learn more shit. Oh, well, at least that's how it's supposed to go. We just learn more shit, yeah. Yo, this campus is putting off a terrible glare. My apologies. I'm always trying to figure out how to fix that glare. And I've looked at other artists set at their studio, and the main thing they say is just like black out your walls and keep your light at a 30-degree angle. And I have still yet to buy a bunch of black paint and black out my walls. All right, let's see if we can learn or listen, I guess, a little bit more.
With the Nubian people, which is another thing that we should be aware of. Nubia has been occupied since the earliest periods of human history. It's almost impossible to know for sure just how far this habitation goes back, but by around 13,000 BCE, the Nubians were quite advanced, and we know this because there is a lot of evidence of complex tools, arrowheads, and even cemeteries that have been found all over Nubia. By 5000 BCE, we start to see the people of this region begin to transition into a more settled life consisting of farming and animal husbandry. Buildings and houses were being built of mud brick and stone instead of straw, and copper and gold were commonly being used for tools and luxury items such as jewelry.
5. A phone plan by Google. Meet Simply Unlimited, our most affordable plan for unlimited data.
In fact, gold all over Nubia. By 5000 BCE, we start to see the people of this region begin to transition into a more settled life consisting of farming and animal husbandry. Buildings and houses were being built of mud brick and stone instead of straw, and copper and gold were commonly being used for tools and luxury items such as jewelry. In fact, gold seems to have been in ample supply in Nubia, and for mainly this reason, the Egyptians became interested in the place. The first time that we hear of an Egyptian incursion into Nubia is during the reign.
But that's what I'm saying. In order to make copper and gold bracelets, first you gotta mine for the gold, or at least find a good riverbed, well, the Nile River, and if there's any gold deposits. But then in order to fucking shape gold, man, you gotta heat that shit and smelt it. Like, that understanding, that ability to identify workable ores, and then the smelting process in order to heat it up so you can shape it into something else, like, that shit always fascinated me, yo. And that process predates Egypt, goldsmithing, or smithing any fucking thing, yo. It's like there's all that old ass knowledge, yo. That shit was around way before fucking Egypt was, yo. Like, the Nubians already know how to make gold jewelry.
Of the Egyptian pharaoh Djedjer. In an inscription from around 3000 BCE and dating to Egypt's first dynasty, we're told that the pharaoh's forces came into conflict with and defeated a band of Nubians. Another mention of conflict with the Nubians is on the famous Palermo stone, which is part of a stele that records the names and deeds of Egypt's Old Kingdom pharaohs. It tells how the pharaoh Senefru took 7,000 Nubians as prisoner, along with 200,000 cattle and sheep. By the 4th and 5th dynasties of Egypt, or around 2500 to 2400 BCE, there were well-established Egyptian colonies in Nubia. Nubia was in everyone's best interest. Therefore, as long as trade between the two lands flowed without interruption, the pharaohs were, for the most part, willing to abandon any plans of annexing lands south of the Second Cataract. However, by around 2100 BCE, things had changed. Though it's unclear as to what was the initial cause, armed conflicts between groups of Nubians and Egyptian forces were a constant occurrence. Details are murky, but Egypt must have felt threatened because the pharaohs built a string of fortresses with massive walls in between the Second and Third Cataracts. But why? What had caused this total reversal of policy and seemed to be so threatening to Egypt? The answer may have been the rise of a new Nubian power just beyond the Third Cataract of the Nile, the city of Kerma. From what we know, the city of Kerma was likely established around the year 2400 BCE. Its location just south of the Third Cataract had two distinct advantages. One was that to get there from Egypt, ships had to first unload and go ashore if they wanted to continue down the Nile further into Africa. So, if you were an invading army from Egypt, you couldn't simply sail all the way to Kerma. You'd have to unload your troops and any supplies before you hit the Third Cataract, or else be destroyed by its fierce rapids and sharp rocks. If you were a commercial or trading vessel, you had to do the same with your crew and any cargo. However, once you were beyond the Third Cataract, you'd need a place to rest, recharge, and probably resupply your ship. And that's where Kerma came in. Not only could merchants rest, recharge, and resupply, but Kerma also provided a market for traders coming from the north to exchange goods with those who lived further south down the Nile. Thus, the city's location provided both defense and potential for profit, making it a great base for a flourishing kingdom. Many scholars call this kingdom the First Kingdom of Kush. By around 1850 BCE, Kerma's influence had grown so much that it was a direct threat to Egypt. According to an inscription found at the Egyptian site of El Kab, Nubians attacked and looted the city, carrying off alabaster vases, copper daggers, statues, and other valuable items. In response, the Egyptians launched a punitive expedition into Nubia, but the damage to Egyptian prestige had already been done. The fact that Nubians could launch such brazen attacks well above the Second Cataract was great cause for alarm. There wasn't much, though, that the pharaoh.
I think it's very important to make high-quality education available to everybody.
In northern, or lower Egypt, he was under attack by a people from Western Asia called the Hyksos, who eventually went on to establish their own dynasty and rule much of Egypt for about 75 years. Towards the end of their reign, the Hyksos attempted to create an alliance.
Yeah, the Hyksos were like the first light-skinned people that came into that motherfucker.
Kerma was Kamose, who ruled from Thebes, the Egyptian territory.
And so this is what they have to admit right here, like the early Egyptians.
After intercepting correspondent.
The early Egyptians and the ancient Nubians, they all looked the same. They were all black people, yeah. But then those Hicks come into that motherfucker and they just look like Arab. They're more like Berber looking motherfuckers. I gotta take a piss break real quick. I might need to grab a bigger brush.
BCE, Kerma's influence had grown so much that it was a direct threat to Egypt. According to an inscription found at the Egyptian site of El Kab, Nubians attacked and looted the city, carrying off alabaster vases, copper daggers, statues, and other valuable items. In response, the Egyptians launched a punitive expedition into Nubia, but the damage to Egyptian prestige had already been done. The fact that Nubians could launch such brazen attacks well above the Second Cataract was great cause for alarm. There wasn't much, though, that the pharaoh could do. In northern, or lower Egypt, he was under attack by a people from Western Asia called the Hyksos, who eventually went on to establish their own dynasty and rule much of Egypt for about 75 years. Towards the end of their reign, the Hyksos attempted to create an alliance with the kings of Kerma. What stood between their capital of Avaris and Kerma was Kamose, who ruled from Thebes the Egyptian territories that were not controlled by the Hyksos. After intercepting correspondence between Kerma and Avaris, Kamose attacked Nubian forces and captured territories and former Egyptian outposts up to the Second Cataract of the Nile. He then raced to Avaris to attack the Hyksos, but was defeated. However, his brother, who became Ahmose I and founded the 18th dynasty of Egypt, finished what Kamose had started by defeating the Hyksos and chasing them out of Egypt once and for all. He then turned his gaze south towards Nubia. Up until that time, the Egyptians had little interest in expanding their territory and becoming an empire. However, the Hyksos invasion and rule of their land had changed all of that. Unlike in the past, where the Egyptians were primarily interested in commerce and reluctant to rule Nubia directly, Ahmose and his successors decided that it was in Egypt's best long-term interest to control Nubia outright. Thus, he launched numerous campaigns in the south with the intention of annexing Nubia and making it part of the new Egyptian empire. For nearly 90 years, the two sides fought, but by 1460 BCE, Egypt had finally conquered all of Nubia, including the kingdom of Kush based at Kerma. Kerma still remained a prosperous city during the years of Egyptian occupation. However, another city, Napata, was on the rise. Though its origins aren't exactly known, some say it was founded by the pharaoh Thutmose III, while others say that it already existed before he arrived there, there's no doubt that Napata became an extremely important Nubian city during the New Kingdom period of Egypt. Regardless of its beginnings, Napata was without a doubt influenced by Egyptian culture. Pharaoh Thutmose III had built a great temple to the god Amun there below the nearby mountain known as Jebel Barkal, which would eventually become the most holy religious site in Kush for much of its history. During what's become known as the Third Intermediate Period, Egypt became fractured politically. The opportunity arose for the Nubians to once again gain control of their country. It was a clan from the city of Napata that would become the most powerful in Nubia and usher in its greatest period of prosperity, not to mention rule over Egypt. The first real Nubian king that we have historical records for is Alara. There were kings before Alara, but their names aren't known, only the record that they existed. Alara, who was born in the city of Sanam, came to power around the year 785 BCE and ruled for 20 years. It's difficult to confirm what he was doing during that time, but it's likely that he consolidated his rule in Upper Nubia at least up to the Third Cataract, which would have included Kerma. In 765 BCE, his brother, Kashta, succeeded him. Kashta pushed Kush's borders beyond Nubia and into Egypt. He captured the city of Thebes and put his daughter, Amenirtis, in the position of wife of the god of Amun, which was essentially the equivalent of high priestess of Egypt. This move is considered by many scholars to be even more important than any military victories, because it helped to legitimize Kushite claims over Upper Egypt. Kashta then declared himself to be the pharaoh. However, Lower Egypt remained outside of his control. That region was conquered by Kashta's brother and successor, Pianki, better known as Piye. Towards the end of his reign, Piye and his generals campaigned in Upper Egypt and the Nile Delta region against all who wouldn't submit to his authority. He allowed many of the princes who opposed him in the Nile Delta region to keep their positions as long as they pledged their allegiance to him and vowed not to take up arms against his government. With their promises given, Piye returned to Napata. The Delta princes, however, reneged their agreements with Piye and rebelled. After Piye passed away in 722 BCE, his younger brother, Shabaka, came to power. He lived during interesting times. First, Shabaka had to deal with rebel princes in the Delta region. Whereas PA had offered mercy, Shabaka offered fire. Literally. The rebel ringleader, a prince from the preceding 24th dynasty named Bakaranev, had been one of those who had pledged his loyalty to PA, only to break his oath and rebel. As punishment, when Shabaka captured him, he burned him alive. Then, there was the looming threat of Assyria. Starting during PA's reign and continuing into Shabaka's, Egypt's Nubian pharaohs formed alliances with the kingdom of Judah as well as various Phoenician city-states. The next king, Shabbataka, also had the Assyrian threat to deal with. Like his predecessor, he maintained strong ties and alliances with the free kingdoms of Canaan and the Levant. To aid his allies, he sent men with his younger brother Taharka to assist the forces of King Hezekiah of Judah, as well as King Luli of the Phoenician city-states of Tyre and Sidon. They were getting ready to face the Assyrian armies of King Sennacherib. While the Phoenicians didn't fare so well, Hezekiah and the city of Jerusalem held their ground, and the Assyrians were forced to withdraw back east to their homeland. For now, the Assyrian threat was gone, but they'd no doubt be back in the future. The years in battle had given Taharka valuable experience in combating the Assyrians, as well as strengthening ties with the Kushite dynasty's allies in the east. In 690 BCE, Taharka became the pharaoh of Egypt and Kush. Upon Sennacherib's assassination, his son, Esarhaddon, ascended the throne of Assyria and returned to Canaan. Taharka once again aided revolts in the Phoenician cities of Tyre and Sidon, but to no avail. Esarhaddon crushed the revolts, and in 673 BCE, invaded Egypt. He met Taharka's forces at Tanis, but the army of the Kushite king was no match for Esarhaddon's more advanced military technology and camel cavalry, something that the Egyptians had never seen before. Despite his defeats, Taharka fought on, supporting his Phoenician and Judean allies, as well as retaking the Delta. Around the year 667 or 666 BCE, Ashurbanipal invaded Egypt, retook the Delta, the city of Memphis, and then made his way to Thebes, sacking all of these areas in the process. By now, though, there was little that Taharka could do, and so heartbroken, he ventured back to Napata. Though still king of Kush, Taharka was a broken man and died shortly afterward in the year 664 BCE. Despite his defeat, Taharka was an extremely well-liked pharaoh, and by any measure, a pretty good ruler and leader in terms of how he treated his people and those around him. He was also a great builder and left many monuments to his name. He lived a really fascinating life, and there are more details to his story which I'll no doubt cover in the sequels to this program. Despite the fact that eventually the Assyrian Empire lost control of Egypt and was conquered by a coalition of Babylonians and Medes, the Kushite kings of Napata never really attempted to reclaim the thrones of Thebes or Memphis. In fact, they were often on the defensive. In 591 BCE, the new Egyptian pharaoh, Psamtik II, launched a full invasion of Kush. Not only did he have Egyptian troops, but also used Greek and Cariot mercenaries to supplement his already large army. His forces were able to venture deep into the heart of Nubia, well past the Third Cataract, and finally capture the Kushite capital of Napata itself. It was shortly after this event, and most likely because of it, that in the year 590 BCE, the Kushite capital was moved to the city of Meroe, which was much further down the Nile, between the 5th and 6th cataracts. For the next few hundred years until the kingdom's fall, Meroe would be the official capital and residence of the kings of Kush. Napata still remained an important center of Kushite culture, and for many decades, kings were still buried in the royal cemeteries on its outskirts. But for all practical purposes, Meroe was the administrative capital of the empire. Meroe was a beautiful city, known for its palaces, temples, and gardens filled with fruit trees. It was also at the junction of where traders from the Red Sea, Ethiopia, and sub-Saharan Africa would often meet. And land there was much better suited for farming than in the area around Napata. The Kushites began the process of breaking away culturally from Egypt. Over time, more distinctly Nubian gods and goddesses were worshipped over Egyptian ones. And in the 2nd century BCE, the use of Egyptian hieroglyphics was replaced with an entirely new Meroitic writing system. even their artwork and style of dress took on the indigenous characteristics of Meroe and the nearby region. This of course made sense, as the Kushite court's proximity to Egypt was much farther away. There were still battles with the Egyptians for Lower Nubia to the north, especially during the time after Alexander the Great's successors in Egypt, specifically the Macedonian general Ptolemy and his successors. These battles with the Ptolemies went on for a couple of centuries, with both sides gaining and losing ground, but not making substantial long-term gains on each other.
21 Lagi and Ptolemy II were fucking the successors of Alexander the Great. Everybody always, like I say, man.
Then came the Romans.
Yeah, everybody come and try to take Egypt.
In the year 30 BCE, the Romans under Octavian, who later went by the title Augustus Caesar, or simply Augustus, overthrew the last Ptolemaic ruler of Egypt, Cleopatra VII. The Romans then annexed Egypt, making it a province of their empire. This changed the balance of power in the region because, unlike Egypt under the Ptolemies, Rome was a powerful and vast empire that essentially encompassed the entire Mediterranean world and large parts of Europe. And it was expanding. The Romans knew that Nubia was rich in valuable metals and other resources, which put it on their radar. Like Egyptian rulers of the past, they also thought that they could demand tribute from Nubia's rulers. Initially, the Kushites did agree to pay the Romans a tribute in order to keep them out of Nubia. Fearing though that Rome was preparing a full-scale invasion, the Kushites under their great queen, Amenarrenes, invaded Egypt and seized Egyptian towns, reportedly all the way up to Thebes. One thing that I want to mention here, in Nubian society, it wasn't uncommon for rulers to be female. Not only this, but Kushite queens, called Kandakes, or as the term has been Latinized, Candace, were known to have been great warriors. Amenarrenes was such a queen. For about 5 years, she personally led her armies against Roman positions in Lower Nubia, taking captured Roman soldiers and many treasures from Egypt back to Meroe. Among the treasures Amenarrenes' troops brought back was a larger-than-life bronze head of Augustus. The head of Augustus at Meroe was eventually put under the staircase leading up to the altar of the Victory Temple. Another story is that the head was actually put at the foot of Queen Amenarrenes' throne. I had read somewhere that this symbolized that the Romans would always be under the feet of the Kushites. In 25 BCE, the Roman governor of Egypt, General Petronius, counterattacked by leading a large Roman force deep into Nubia. He arrived at the great city of Napata and burned it. He then marched onward to Meroe, but ultimately could not make it to the capital, possibly due to the fact that the Kushite defenses of Meroe were quite strong. Thus, he garrisoned his men on a fortified ridge that would allow them to hold out until reinforcements arrived. The Kushites, though they would be able to deflect a Roman advance on Meroe, did not have the manpower to dislodge the Romans from their fortified position, at least not without a great cost in lives and resources. Thus, the conflict turned into a stalemate. Wanting the Romans to leave before they could be reinforced, in 22 BCE, Queen Amenarrenes sent envoys to the island of Samos to negotiate a treaty with Augustus. The final agreement was as such. The Kushites would pay the same tribute to the Romans that they'd agreed to before the war, as well as recompensate the Egyptian cities that they'd attacked. In return, the Romans would leave and hand back all of the Nubian territories that they'd captured from the Kushites. Essentially, things went back to the way that they'd been before the start of the war. Of course, Augustus's head still remained in Meroe. That wouldn't leave the city until 1910, when an archaeological expedition to Meroe would dig it up and bring it back to London, where it lies today in the British Museum. During the next few centuries, not much is known about the Kushite Empire other than a few clashes with both Romans and African tribes. Around the year 300, though, the Romans left, and the parts of Nubia that they once controlled were ruled and governed by indigenous tribes. There was also a new, growing power to the south, the Kingdom of Aksum, in what is today Ethiopia. How the Kushite kingdom came to an end is still debated by scholars. The popular theory is that in the year 330, the Aksumites captured the city of Meroe and absorbed the surrounding area, effectively ending the kingdom of Kush. Others, though, believe that the decline was much more gradual, with perhaps the Kushites being defeated by another tribe, the Nuba. What is known is that by 330, the kingdom of Kush was no more. For over 1,000 years, the kingdom, really empire of Kush, had reigned supreme in Nubia. Whether from Kerma, Napata, or Meroe, the Kushites were a constant force to be reckoned with. Despite sharing a great deal with their neighbors, the Egyptians, the Kushites had an original civilization of their own and remained profoundly African until the end. So, if you didn't before, I hope that you have a better idea of the fascinating and glorious history of the Kingdom of Kush. This was just an introduction. There's a lot more to their story that I'll be discussing in future episodes, so please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, be sure to check out Voices of the Past video on Hanno the Navigator, and From Nothing's video on Ghana, Susu, Mali, and the Songhai Empires. Also check out the other great videos in the Project Africa collaboration. The link to the playlist is in the video description. Thanks a lot, and have an awesome day.
Dyson's re-engineered purifiers not only filter dust and allergens, the catalytic filter's nanotunnels destroy formaldehyde continuously to purify heat or cool you. Buy direct from the people who made it. Free shipping from Dyson.
He said painting Aunt Jemima. That's not even funny, bro. Like, I mean, if you're gonna throw a joke, I mean, make that joke funny at least. Like, I want a ha-ha too, motherfucker. I want a chi-chi. I want a LOL. Working on them shadows. Damn, them shadows looking so real. Like, if I put my hand there, I should get a shadow on my fingers. But no, it's not. It's just paint. It's just paint, man. It's optical illusion, you see? It's all flat. There is actually no shadow there. Oh, the light in here is terrible. But I'm a starving artist, man. I'm starving for a better light source. Starving for a better light source.
When we see Pleiadian shapes, we see a sphere of light. Because
African history is often seen as little more than a footnote in the march of human civilization, an appendage to the supposedly richer tapestries of European and Middle Eastern antiquity. This assessment could not be more wrong. In modern-day Sudan, there are the ruins of once magnificent cathedrals, hewn from mud brick, standing amidst the desert sands, remnants of a mighty civilization in the heart of Eastern Africa, which for centuries stood as an enclave of Christendom amidst a sea of Islamic powers. Welcome to our first video on the civilizations of Africa, where we will cover the forgotten kingdoms of Nubia. If you want to learn about the history of Africa, the sponsor of today's video, Blinkist, has you covered. Work towards being your best self in 2021, improve your knowledge, and learn about the world around you with Blinkist. This platform has been incredible for our personal growth and leisure in 2020, as it allowed us to learn and improve on the go and quickly. Blinkist takes the best insights from more than 3,000 non-fiction books and condenses them into 15-minute reads or ready-to-listen audios. The Rift by Alex Perry describes the recent developments on the continent, while China's Second Continent by Howard French describes Chinese efforts to influence Africa. The best thing? You can get offline access to all titles. Recently, Blinkist added full-length audiobooks. Premium subscribers get up to 65% off the regular retail price.
I found myself, the important is this office complex that was one of the first international standards. They're really interesting discovery. I spent early years of my career in Africa as a freelancer, for the Washington Post and various other people, and then I did hired by the New York Times and worked in a few other places, parts of the world for the Times, and then went back to Africa for the New York Times. And so by the time I got to Shanghai, I had worked in Africa twice, and I arrived in Africa, I started in China in 2003 at the Portland, and I'm literally looking out at the entrance to this big complex and noticing quite unprepared for this. The frequency of African delegations arriving in that hotel was steadily and rapidly increasing, from a trickle in 2003 to a flood in, say, 2005. And because I had worked in Africa so much, I was naturally sort of sensitive to the question of what did this represent, and I began to poke around. And at this point, I can't say that it really was the person who discovered China, Africa, and the topic a bit much, but I think not a whole lot of people were paying a great amount of attention to this. So I pursued the question as I did that, the fact a really booming set of relationships that was just getting around. And so these heads of state delegations who were coming to Shanghai, so typically either on their way to shopping, sightseeing, rather than official trips. And I began talking to people with federalist delegations, and I began talking with people in the Chinese policy world, and I began asking others as well about what this all was. So by 2005, I proposed a series to the New York Times, having satisfied myself with the work I did a three-country series, three-part series about what I'm going to call a relationship, which I don't think a relationship with you, and I said that this was really not happening. That's not happening. We have a continent of 54 countries, and a country called China, and this is really a set of relationships. It's almost a state of China. Anyway, I went to the continent to do a three-part series for the Times. I traveled for a project I traveled to Ethiopia, Chad, and Malawi. And it was what I did was what many people just began to do and then subsequently continue to do in some people's students, which is write what we journalists call a kind of 30,000-foot situation. So you have China over here, and you have Africa over here, and there's all this activity. In a very big picture sense, that question I'm trying to answer is best I did. And that Times in 2008 became the faculty of the journalism school, and very shortly afterwards Atlantic magazine. So by this time now lots of people are China. And Columbia Journalism School, I'm sorry, Atlantic magazine asked me to write another trip to cover three countries. This was Atlantic, Tanzania, Zambia, and Congo. Traveled overland via the Tazara Railway from Dar es Salaam, the economic capital of Tanzania, all the way to the terminus, which is kind of Zambia's this kind of fireball, then kind of across the fireball, right at this junction. Africa's major copper producing road into the Congo and stopped various places, but at the end of the railway, I had the Congo, so we produced again a large magazine piece and asked them lots of big questions. What are transit issues? What's the need for et cetera, et cetera. When I returned from that trip, I was asked subsequently, and this, I'm describing this, it's not like this actually is actually a series of actions, starting from the Monday enforcement to having the Atlantic now approached me to ask me to write about this again, and now write another Atlantic piece, and publishers approached me and said I wasn't really seeking to write about this. I just thought it was a pretty popular topic. I began to think, so what more can I really say? He gets away from the 30,000 feet and has values in the picture. And I thought back about my reporting experiences for the Times in 2006 and for Atlantic in 2008 and 2009. And the thing that really stood out to me is something that I mentioned just a little bit of the Times series. I mentioned a bit more in the Atlantic piece, but it was never really focused. It was not really focused what I did for them. And that is the movement of human beings involved in this interaction, which had really taken off as scientific measurements. Anecdotally, between 2006 and 2008, Atlantic went to 3 different countries each trip. The scale of human presence was markedly different. By the time I get to Congo in 2009, and there were Chinese people. It's hard to exaggerate. So in a city like Lubumbashi, there were Chinese people on every street.
All right. I think that's a good stopping point for right now. I'll definitely be back up here in a couple hours. I just got to go fix some breakfast.
So that's between mid-90s now and
Yeah, it's my turn to cook breakfast. So
At the end,
get some breakfast together, and after I eat something, I'll be back up here. Because today I really need to focus on the studio. I got a lot of work I need to get done, so you can expect me to be back up here later on. Catch you guys later.